Hey there, welcome to the channel. So today I want to talk about something that's not stock related at all today. So today I want to talk about what's going on in Ukraine. So we have some heightened tensions here in Ukraine, and Ukraine is on the border with Russia, and it was, I believe, it was part of the USSR before the USSR broke up. So let's go and try to understand a little bit more about what's going on because from the mainstream media, we will get one view of the situation, but from my perspective, there seems to be a little bit more to it than they make it out to be. So, first of all, we can go to actually CNN has this interactive map. And it's actually a bunch of good information here. We have the language, it's a divided Ukraine, and so you can see there that you have this east versus west situation. We have the country where on the eastern part of it is heavily dominated by Russian speakers. And then, even here, 75% plus down in Crimea. And then on the presidential elections in 2010, basically, you can see that the election kind of went in that same direction. And so if you look at those elections and you look at the reporting on those elections, it basically were, the observers, they're basically like pretty much fair elections. And these are the ones that, these are the elections where Yanukovych was elected, et cetera. And I believe there's a 2014, I'm not 100% sure on that, but basically what happened is at some point, this guy Yanukovych, was basically didn't want to sign an agreement to get closer to the EU. It's basically, this political agreement, whatever, to like kind of more align with the EU. Didn't want to do that and wanted to align more with the Soviet Union, with Russia. And so after that, in 2014, there was this whole what they call the Maidan Q and all that. And basically all this stuff happened, blah, blah, blah. And there's, some indication that our, CIA, or we were definitely in there encouraging and helping this whole thing happen. But so basically what we have is a divided country. So at that time, you basically had Yanukovych kind of aligning more with Russia. And Russia is, so if we look over here on the map, you can see Russia is, the dominant power in the region. And if we look at Ukraine, in the eastern part of Ukraine, this is where you hear all this name of the Luhansk and Donetsk region here. Now, what's really kind of going on is one of the things that we really need to look at is this area, Crimea, this little thing, the Crimean Peninsula. In here, so this is actually connected to the land here, but with Ukraine. Now, at some point, basically, hey, Ukraine was this whole country, including Crimea. Now, there's something to note here. If we look at, okay, one of the important things to understand about Crimea is that Russia has this Sevastopol naval base there. Now, we have to understand some things here. The construction of this port started in 1772. They've had a presence there this whole time. So you're talking about they've had a naval base there in this strategically important region for many, many, many years. We're talking going back to the 1700s. Now, if we look at a map, and we're going to go to the Google Maps, you can see here's the Ukraine, here's the Luhansk, Donetsk. These are the what you call the breakaway region where we're having all the basically sort of civil war going on. But notice that it's in that part of the country that's heavily aligned with Russia, but also it creates a land bridge to Sevastopol. So there's a couple things. When Russia came in and annexed Crimea, the real reason behind this is that, and we still have this talk now, Ukraine, including Crimea, joining NATO would be an incredibly dangerous thing, right? You're basically saying you're going to put a border country that's going to be a part of NATO on our border, and it's going to be a part of NATO, meaning that if Ukraine gets attacked, an attack on one is an attack on all, means we're going to start World War III. That's basically what it means if you have Ukraine join NATO, okay? And it's right on their borders. So that gives, like, if there's tensions there, like, think about it. It also gives Ukraine a free pass. Well, you might say, hey, look, well, why does Russia care that it's part of NATO? They'd only care if they're going to attack it, right? Well, yeah. But the other side of the coin is Ukraine now is like, hey, I'm part of NATO. I got a free pass to go mess around and do whatever I want to do, right? So it works both ways. We have to not be childish about things. So think about it now. If Ukraine had joined NATO and was allowed into NATO when they had Crimea, that would mean that the Russia's essentially only warm water port, their huge naval base, would be on NATO territory. Does that make any sense at all? So it'd be interesting if a war did break out between Russia and NATO. NATO would probably bomb Sevastopol, so they'd bomb their own member states' land. Does that make any sense? It makes no sense. So here's the thing. So what's really going on here, besides the fact that, yeah, this eastern part of Ukraine is much more ethnically aligned with Russia, is look, Russia wants a land bridge. It's really, to me, it looks like it's part of this. They still need the land bridge because, yes, they're over here and they built bridges across the Kerch Strait here. So they got access here, but they really want that land bridge. They basically want that land bridge because if something happens and war breaks out with someone, then they're in deep trouble, right? Because they basically can lose this base. They can't supply this base. It's going to be a problem. Now, if you're one of those super hawks, which we have many in the West at this point that seem to want war at all costs, it's rather shocking. Keep in mind that even when they have Sevastopol here, that they're still hemmed in. The Black Sea is here, but look, they cannot get those ships out. Do you understand? Like, this is why Turkey is so strategic from a NATO point of view, and Turkey is still a member of NATO. See, if they're going out and they're like, hey, we're going to send subs out or we're going to send naval forces out, they got to get through Turkey. And this is very narrow straits right in this middle of Istanbul. They have to come through here. This is only a few miles wide. And then when they come through there, then they have to shoot the Dardanelles. This is the Dardanelles Straits. And if you remember from World War I, this is where Gallipoli was. And this is where the British and the Anzacs, they basically totally failed at taking this. They tried all these landings, a huge failure. And what were they doing? They were trying to get forces on here so that they can then get their ships through so that they could have a go at Turkey at that time, right? So in the big picture, if you're in a world where you want to dominate and rule everything, then of course keep the pressure up on Russia at Ukraine. You just be like, no, screw you guys. You do anything, we're going to go to war over it. Okay. But if you're in a sane world where you acknowledge that there's other countries with other interests and there's other people with other interests, and you have to acknowledge that they're a powerful country, and do you want to keep putting pressure on them? Why are you putting pressure on them? Why are you on a war footing over this, right? It makes no sense unless you're power hungry and you're greedy and you're drunk with power, literally. Because even if they came in and annexed this whole region, even if they did that, they're still hemmed in by Turkey. And so from a strategic point of view, from a political point of view, it sort of makes no difference, right? It really makes no difference. Ukraine becomes split into an eastern west part, right? From a military point of view, they're still very hemmed in. So now, given that, and we know what, who knows, Biden is probably just talking or whatever. But now the other thing, and so this is important as well, things have changed, and you could watch on YouTube, this guy has these simulations, and where they, simulation where there's this attack, that attack. And what you'll find is that, the situation when, like back in the 80s, first Gulf War, second Gulf War, we had this issue. And then also with NATO doing their bombings and related to this Serbia situation, the Bosnia situation. The thing was at that time, you could have this view, and literally it was this view where it's like, hey, look, the West can be like, we're mad about this and we can do some bombing. So now let's look at it and say, well, could the West come in here and do some bombing? And this would be, basically the US firing up fighter planes and going. Well, there's one little problem. What's the problem? Malaysia Airlines Flight 17. This plane was a passenger plane and it got shot down by what they believe to be a Buck surface to air missile. And this was in the eastern Ukraine. So the thing that we have to understand is that there really isn't much of an option here for the US to go in and say, hey, we're going to help our buddies out. We're going to help our buddies out by, let's say Russia comes in and they're like, okay, we're going to start annexing, and they bring 100,000 troops into this region, right? Okay, the US comes in and says, okay, we don't like that. We're going to go in and we're going to start bombing, right? Well, it's a big problem. These surface to air missiles, and the Buck surface to air missiles are the older ones. They have the S-300s, the S-400s. It's not going to be an easy thing. We will not have just free reign of the air over Ukraine. It's not going to happen. So you need to kind of put things in perspective. If the US wants to go to war over this, if Russia wants to go to war over this, and the US tries to go with their typical thing that they've been doing for decades, which is like, look, we're not going to put troops on the ground. That's too dangerous, right? So what we want to do is we just want to, we'll do some bombing missions, right? And we'll beat them by the air. It's not going to work that way. Things have changed so much with surface to air missiles that there's going to be a high cost to pay, And the thing is, when you look at the scenarios and the simulations that they do, it's like, look, you can't just send in a couple squadrons. Like, you have to commit, because basically you're going to have to go and battle with the surface to air squadrons. You're going to have to battle that out first. So you're going to need dozens and dozens of planes. You probably need hundreds of planes with all the electronic warfare, all that stuff. You're going to have to commit to it. You can't go half-ass. You can't be like, oh, send in like a 4-pack of planes and do some bombing. No, you're going to lose those planes, right? Once it becomes apparent, once you start dropping bombs, it's like, okay, well, you're attacking us, and so we're going to start launching these missiles. And the other thing to keep in mind too is that, right, if the missiles are not already there, they're going to have to move them, but they would move them quickly. That as part of that initial troop, they're going to move those missiles into this region. So the point is, like, if it starts over here on the border, they probably have surface to air protection within Russia, but you can't bomb within Russia. I mean, that's a really dangerous thing. Remember, we're still nuclear powers. So this whole concept, but here's the thing. So now what is the solution to this? The solution is, let's leave them the hell alone. Right? Here's the thing. Part of me says, hey, look, if they go in and invade in Donetsk and Luhansk, I mean, I get it. Like, that's kind of like, look, that seems like an overreach, right? And so I can see this argument to stop that. But when you look at the reason why they would do that, it's like, it's because of this concept that they want to get Ukraine and NATO. So that's the problem. If you get rid of that problem, they have no need to do anything there. They won't do anything. And conversely, if Ukraine still ends up being part of NATO at some point, then they have to do something. You put a gun to their head. They have to do something. So that's kind of the way I look at it. So it's very simple. Ukraine is a buffer state. It's always been a buffer state. Leave it a buffer state. Leave them alone. Be like, hey, look, it's off the table. It's not going to be part of NATO. No way. In return, let's back down the pressures. It's never going to be part of NATO. We understand, quietly, we understand, hey, look, if things go to hell in a handbasket and we go to war over something else, we know that strategically, yeah, you're going to come in and you're going to take this region, and hey, we're at war anyways. That'll happen. But in the meantime, let's be peaceful, leave it a buffer state. But it's really amazing in the US government right now. We just have all these people that just are, they just hate Russia. They're like, they believe they through the 2016 election. And none of these things are really true. Was there some meddling? Sure, there's probably some meddling. Was there some meddling in the most recent US election? Sure, there was some funny stuff going on. Did that mean Trump won? No, it doesn't mean he won. But was there some funny stuff going on? Yeah. Was there funny stuff going on in 2016? Yeah. there's always some stuff going on. Nothing's perfectly clean, but to believe that they like single-handedly got Trump elected and that Trump is a Manchurian candidate is insane. So the bigger picture is that we have leaders that are not leaders. We have leaders that are just actually believe things that are really dangerous. And so, you know, in terms of Biden stumbling us into like a world war, it really could happen. I mean, I don't think it's likely because I think that, look, we have no choice. We're going to have to back off. Um, or we just don't do very little. Basically, if something happens, they go there, they start doing something. The troops on the ground. And basically it's kind of sad because it's like all the Ukrainians, they're pulling them out of the West to go to war in the East. And then what do the local people think there? I don't know what they think, but they're more aligned with Russia, it seems. So, you send an army, a foreign army, which is part of Ukraine, but it's basically, an Eastern army, which is foreign, into your hometowns to go fight Russia that maybe you want to be a part of. I don't know that it makes any sense. So that's my view on this situation. I think that, it's totally unnecessary. I think that, you can be a little strong about it for sure. But, big picture, they're hemmed in this whole region. Russia's very hemmed in, and they've been hemmed in for 50, 60 years, right? Basically the founding of NATO and after World War II, forget it. It was all just designed to hem them in. So how much power do you want? That's it for this one.